You are lower class.
The courtroom froze. Rich Karen strutted in, tossed her hair, and said to the judge, "Judge Judy, you're wrong. If I want to, my father could buy you." Gasps rippled through the room like wind through glass. Judge Judy slowly rose from her chair, her face turning to stone. "Because what happens next will shock you." 36 seconds later, Karen was crying, and no one could believe what happened next. You won't believe what Judge Judy decided next. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button. The echo of Karen's words, "If I want to, my father could buy you," still lingered in the air like smoke after a gunshot. The audience sat frozen, their faces split between disbelief and fascination. The bailiff's hand hovered near his belt, uncertain whether to intervene or let the tension breathe. Judge Judy didn't flinch. She simply looked up from her file, eyes steady, the kind of silence that doesn't calm a room. It tightens it. Karen stood tall in her heels, her designer dress shimmering under the fluorescent lights. She adjusted her diamond bracelet with the precision of someone used to being watched. "Are we done wasting time?" she said, brushing an invisible speck of dust off her sleeve. Her tone carried the sweet venom of entitlement, soft on the surface but meant to cut. The camera panned slowly across the courtroom, the stunned plaintiff clutching her folder, the spectators leaning forward breathless, and Judge Judy, utterly motionless behind the bench. Finally the judge spoke, not loud, not angry, just sharp enough to pierce through the arrogance. "Miss Carter," she said evenly, "this is not a shopping mall. You cannot buy respect here." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the room. Karen smirked. "Respect goes both ways, doesn't it? You don't talk to my kind like that." Judge Judy's head tilted slightly, the smallest gesture but enough to shift the energy. "Your kind," she repeated, her voice lowering a half octave. "What kind is that exactly?" Karen didn't answer. She only smiled, that smug, hollow smile of someone who confuses attention for power. Her lawyer whispered something, but she waved him off like an annoying fly. Across the room, the plaintiff, a young single mother named Denise, tried to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled as she held onto the folder that carried months of humiliation, late paychecks, rude texts, and the dismissal letter that ended her job without warning. She looked up, her eyes meeting Judge Judy's for a brief second. In that glance, something unspoken passed, not words but understanding. Judge Judy turned a page in the file. "So," she said, tone even, "you are being sued for unpaid wages and defamation by your former employee, Miss Denise Harris. You've chosen to represent yourself?" Karen crossed her arms. "I don't need representation for lies. She's bitter I fired her." "Bitter," Judy repeated softly, scribbling a note. "Interesting word choice." She looked up again, her gaze narrowing like a camera zoom. "Miss Harris, you'll speak after Miss Carter explains her version of events." Karen smirked again, brushing her hair back. "Gladly." The light seemed colder now, reflecting off the polished floor like ice. Even the cameras tilted slightly closer, drawn to the storm beginning to form. Judge Judy folded her hands. "Then let's begin, Miss Carter. But before you do, remember this. Arrogance doesn't win here. Facts do." For the first time, Karen's smirk faltered, just slightly. The gavel hadn't struck yet, but everyone could feel it. The battle had begun. Karen inhaled sharply, leaning toward the microphone. "Fine," she said. "But when I'm done, you'll see why everyone says Judge Judy gets it wrong." The gavel's echo hadn't faded when Judge Judy's voice sliced through the charged air. "Miss Harris," she said calmly, "please step forward." Denise rose slowly from her seat, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Every movement trembled with quiet restraint, the kind that comes from too many years of being talked over. Her shoes clicked against the tile floor, faint but steady. She reached the witness stand, eyes fixed on the judge, not on the woman who had humiliated her for months. Across the room, Karen leaned back, smirking. "This should be good," she murmured, just loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Judge Judy didn't look at her. "Go on, Miss Harris." Denise opened the folder. The papers inside were neatly arranged, color-coded, a portrait of someone who'd been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone realized. "I worked at her boutique for 11 months, she began, her voice shaking but clear. "When I started, she promised fair pay, bonuses, and training. None of that happened. Instead, I was told I should be grateful just to be there. Karen laughed softly. You were lucky to be there. Most people would have killed for that job. The judge's pen stopped mid-air. Excuse me, Miss Carter. Her tone didn't rise. It cooled. You'll get your turn. Karen's mouth opened, but one look from the bench froze her mid-breath. The cameras zoomed slightly closer, the air heavier now. Denise continued, gaining strength with every word. She docked my pay for being 5 minutes late, but when her friends showed up an hour behind schedule, she called it fashionably late. She yelled in front of customers, called me, she hesitated, eyes stinging, a charity case. The courtroom murmured, gasps blending with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses. Do you have proof of these statements? Denise nodded, sliding a printed text thread across the desk. Every message, every insult. The judge skimmed through the pages, her face unreadable. Karen's confidence began to tremble. She tried to interject, but Judy's hand lifted, a silent command. Miss Harris, Judy said quietly, why didn't you quit? Denise swallowed hard. Because I needed the job. My daughter's medical bills. She trailed off, blinking fast, trying not to cry. And because I thought if I worked harder, she'd treat me better. Even the bailiff shifted, his jaw tightening. Karen rolled her eyes, muttering, Oh, please. Judy's gaze snapped to her. That will be enough. The room went utterly still. Not a whisper, not a breath. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling vent, like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Denise looked down, closing her folder. That's all I wanted to say. Judge Judy leaned back, eyes fixed on Karen. Her tone was low but surgical. You've just heard her account. You claim she's lying. Karen smiled thinly. Of course she is. That woman would cry over a discount gone wrong. Judy's stare hardened. An invisible line crossed. Careful, Miss Carter. You said you wanted to prove me wrong. Karen lifted her chin, voice dripping with false calm. I still do. Judge Judy folded her hands, the silence sharp as glass. Then, she said, let us start with your version and see how long it stands. The silence in the courtroom had weight. You could feel it pressing against the walls, against the people trying not to blink. Even Karen seemed to feel it, though she hid it well, perched like a queen on trial, crossing her legs with an exaggerated sigh. Judge Judy's gaze didn't waver. You may present your defense, Miss Carter. Karen smiled and slow, deliberate. Gladly. The microphone caught the faint clink of her bracelet as she gestured dramatically. First, let's be clear, this woman, she nodded toward Denise, was not fired. She quit. She had an attitude problem. Always late, always complaining, always expecting special treatment because of her situation. I was running a business, not a charity. Her words dripped with sugar and venom. The crowd murmured. Judy's pen scratched across the notepad. You have documentation to support that. Karen tilted her head as though insulted. I don't need documentation for basic observation, Your Honor. My staff knows what she was like. Judy looked up. So, no written warnings? No payroll records? No signed contract? Karen laughed, a sharp, practiced sound that didn't reach her eyes. People like me don't need to write things down. I trust my instincts. I run 5 stores. Do you really think I have time to play paper games with employees who what? Judy interrupted, voice soft but heavy. Karen blinked, her rhythm broken. Who can't keep up? The judge leaned forward, elbows resting on the bench. You said you trusted your instincts. I trust evidence. If you've got any, now's the time to show it. Karen's fingers fidgeted with the clasp of her purse. Well, it's all digital. My assistant usually handles that stuff. Your assistant? Judy's brow lifted. The same one who, according to your own messages, you called useless and replaceable? A ripple of shock traveled through the audience. Denise's eyes widened. Karen froze for a heartbeat too long. I don't recall saying that. Judy turned one of the text pages toward her. It's right here, dated April 12th. Your words. Karen forced a brittle laugh. Oh, come on. You're really going to take that literally. It was just sarcasm. Judge Judy's voice dropped to a low, cutting calm. Sarcasm doesn't excuse cruelty. It defines it. The air shifted. Karen's confidence began to flicker, subtle at first, like a candle fighting the wind. Her hands, once steady, now tapped against the table. Denise watched in silence, the first trace of power returning to her posture. The audience could sense it too, a slow turn of the tide. Judge Judy closed the file, her tone cool and surgical. "So your defense, Miss Carter, is that you have no written agreement, no documentation, and your memory, supported by no one, is what you expect this court to believe." Karen crossed her arms, jaw tight. "My reputation speaks for itself." "Then it's about to testify," Judy replied. The crowd exhaled, a collective shiver of anticipation. Judge Judy reached for the plaintiff's folder. "Let's see what the other side has, because so far, all you've offered me is attitude." And as she opened it, Karen's smirk finally began to fade. The sound of the folder opening was louder than it should have been, like the start of a storm. Every eye in the courtroom locked on Judge Judy's hands as she spread the documents across the desk. Papers slid against one another, whispering the truth before anyone spoke it aloud. Karen's jaw tightened. "This should be interesting." Judge Judy didn't respond. She adjusted her glasses and began reading. Her voice stayed even, but each word landed like a gavel strike. "Text message from March 9th. If you cannot afford to look presentable, maybe retail is not for you. Sent from your number, Miss Carter." The air went still. The plaintiff looked down. Karen laughed lightly, shaking her head. "Oh, come on, that's out of context." Judy's gaze rose. "Then give me the context." Karen blinked. "She showed up in sneakers. My store has a dress code. So you commented on her finances instead of her footwear." Karen hesitated, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. "That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean?" Judy asked, leaning forward slightly. No answer came. The camera cut to the plaintiff, Denise, who stood frozen, her face pale but composed. Then back to Judy, her eyes scanning another page. "Text message from May 22nd. Do not ever raise your voice to me again. I could buy your whole family if I wanted." The room gasped. A soundless second passed where even breathing seemed disrespectful. Judge Judy's tone hardened. "Is that also out of context?" Karen swallowed, her voice trembling just slightly. "That was a joke. Humor usually requires someone to laugh," Judy replied without missing a beat. The audience murmured, half in disbelief, half in awe. Karen's smirk returned, but it looked brittle now, like glass that could shatter from the wrong word. Judy set the papers aside. "There are also pay stubs, partial, inconsistent. Some signed by you, others not. Care to explain the discrepancy?" Karen forced another smile. "Accounting handles those things. I'm the face of the brand, not the math. And yet the brand's name," Judy said softly, "is the same one on the signature line." Karen's composure flickered again. Her hand went to her hair, smoothing it through not a strand was out of place. "This is ridiculous. You're focusing on small details." "The small details," Judy replied, "are where truth hides." A slow murmur rolled through the audience, the kind that happens when everyone feels the balance of power shifting. Karen's lawyer shifted uneasily in his chair, whispering something under his breath. Karen ignored him. Her face was red now, her confidence cracking like ice under weight. Judge Judy leaned back. "Miss Carter, arrogance is loud, but truth doesn't need to shout." She tapped the folder once with her pen. "And right now the truth is deafening." Karen opened her mouth, but the judge raised a hand, not to silence her, but to end the pretense. "I think," she said, her voice calm and final, "we just met the real you." Karen's eyes hardened, but her voice betrayed her. "You don't know anything about me." Judge Judy didn't blink. "I know enough." The judge turned toward Karen's lawyer. "Is there anything else your client forgot to mention before I read what's on the next page?" The man hesitated, then looked down. "Actually, there might be." The lawyer's confession hung in the air like smoke no one wanted to breathe. "Yes," he said, voice low. "There was a written agreement. My client instructed it be discarded." The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispers, camera shutters. Judge Judy raised one hand and the noise vanished. Her voice, when she spoke, was almost soft, which somehow made it worse. "Discarded? Or destroyed?" The lawyer's throat bobbed. "Destroyed." Karen spun toward him, eyes blazing. "That's not what I said," she hissed. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it moved faster than her denial could catch it. Judge Judy sat back slowly, folding her hands. "Miss Carter, do you realize what that means?" Karen stammered. "It means my lawyer misunderstood." "It means," Judy cut in, "you tampered with evidence. And you expected me to believe your memory over a written contract that you had burned. A faint laugh escaped from the back of the courtroom, quickly silenced by the bailiff's glare. Karen's confidence began to splinter. You don't know why I did it. Judy tilted her head. Then enlighten us. Karen's chest rose and fell too fast. It wasn't legal. It was unfair. She tricked me into signing something that wasn't true. The judge's pen tapped once against the desk. So your solution was to destroy it instead of contesting it? She was stealing from me, Karen snapped, voice cracking. Judy didn't flinch. Prove it. The words hit harder than a shout. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was judgment in its purest form. Denise's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. The energy in the room had shifted. Everyone felt it. The woman who once walked in like she owned the world was now standing on trial, not just legally but morally. Judge Judy leaned forward, tone low and precise. Do you always confuse ownership with entitlement? Karen blinked. The insult wrapped so elegantly in truth that she didn't react right away. You think you know me? No, Judy said, eyes narrowing. I know the type. A flicker of rage crossed Karen's face. You sit there judging people like you're some kind of saint. You don't know what it's like to build something from nothing. Judy's response came measured, each word deliberate. You built something, all right, but it was never a business. It was a mirror for your ego. The audience went utterly still. Karen's shoulders squared, but her eyes betrayed her. They glistened with the first trace of panic. You don't get to talk to me like that. Judy leaned in, her tone unchanging. Then try listening. That line landed like a verdict. Karen's mouth opened again, but this time no words came. The cameras zoomed in on her trembling hands, manicured nails digging into her palm. For the first time she looked small. Judge Judy turned to the clerk. Bring in the supplemental evidence file, she said calmly. The one marked Exhibit C, the video. Karen's head jerked up. What video? The courtroom door creaked open. A clerk entered, holding a small silver USB drive sealed in an evidence bag. The quiet hum of the cameras seemed to grow louder, like even the machinery could sense something about to change. Judge Judy gestured toward the bailiff. Plug it in. Karen straightened, forcing a smile that was half panic, half pride. This is ridiculous. Whatever that is, it's edited. I own those cameras, Judy didn't answer. The monitor flickered to life, and the room dimmed slightly as the lights above adjusted to the glare of the screen. The audience leaned forward, shadows stretching across their faces. On the screen, grainy footage appeared, the inside of Karen's boutique. Expensive shelves, glass counters, and Karen herself standing over two young employees. Her tone was unmistakable. If you cannot sell at least 5 handbags today, you can find another job. I don't pay for incompetence. Karen's recorded laugh echoed through the courtroom. The real Karen's face went rigid. That's just... Judy raised a hand. Let's let the footage speak. Clip rolled. Karen scolding someone off camera. Do not start crying again. Customers don't like emotional staff. And if you need therapy, pay for it yourself. A murmur rippled through the spectators. Anger, disbelief, shame. The camera panned in on Karen's reaction. Her breathing shallow, her jaw tight. Judy's gaze remained fixed on the screen, but her voice cut cleanly through the air. You said these cameras were yours, which means you also approved what they recorded. Karen swallowed hard. That's not the whole story. My staff hated me. They were jealous. They edited this. The judge turned to the clerk. Date and source? The clerk read from a logbook. Footage submitted anonymously last week, verified through store system metadata. Timestamp matches Miss Harris's employment dates. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. Anonymous submission means nothing. Anyone could... Judy interrupted. Anyone could not access your store's private security cloud without authorization. Whoever sent this wanted truth, not fame. For the first time, Karen had no comeback. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the bailiff's steady stance seemed heavier. The next clip rolled. Karen standing behind the register, smirking into her phone. The thing about poor people, she said, is they're always dramatic. They love playing victim. A collective gasp is sharp, unified. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." The footage ended. The lights brightened again. Judy's eyes lifted from the monitor to Karen's face. Her voice was nearly a whisper, but every word hit like thunder. "Still think I'm wrong?" Karen didn't answer. Her breathing came uneven, shoulders rising and falling too fast. Judge Judy leaned back, the gavel untouched. "Truth doesn't care who owns the cameras, Miss Carter. It only cares what they saw." Karen's chin quivered. "You don't understand," she said, voice cracking. "They provoked me." "Then," Judy said evenly, "you just proved they were right." Karen's hands clenched together, the diamond ring glinting under the courtroom lights, a perfect symbol of her unraveling. Judy nodded toward the clerk. "Send that footage to the Department of Labor for review." Then she turned to Karen. "Next, we'll hear from a former employee, the one who filmed the rest. If you were sitting in that courtroom, would you let her keep talking, or let the silence do the work?" The door opened again, quieter this time. A young woman stepped inside, early 20s, plain clothes, eyes red but steady. She held a small notepad against her chest like armor. The courtroom shifted. Everyone sensed this wasn't just another witness. Judge Judy nodded toward her. "State your name for the record." The young woman's voice trembled slightly. "Maya Thompson. I used to work at Carter Luxe Boutique. I took the video." Karen turned, eyes narrowing. You were fired for stealing." Maya didn't flinch. "You said that because I recorded you," the audience gasped. Karen's voice rose, sharp and defensive. "Lies, she's a disgruntled employee." "She was obsessed with me." Judge Judy raised a hand, not loud, just firm. "Enough." The word carried more weight than shouting ever could. "Miss Thompson, you may continue." Maya opened her notepad, flipping to a page covered in small, nervous handwriting. "You said nobody could touch you, that the court wouldn't care if people like me complained. So I started recording, not to hurt you, but to protect us." Karen scoffed, but her voice cracked. "Us? You were all lazy. I built that store from the ground up." Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. "And how many people did you climb over to get there?" Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't talk to me like that." "Then leave," Judy said, calm as marble. "But if you stay, you'll answer." Karen's face flushed crimson. She stayed. Maya continued, her voice steadier now. "She called us names. Told us crying was weakness. Once she made a girl sweep the floor in front of customers because she misspelled a label." Karen's eyes darted between the judge and the cameras. Realizing too late the world was watching her lose control. "I was strict," she said, forcing a smile that didn't fit her trembling face. "It's called leadership." Judy leaned forward. "Leadership doesn't humiliate, it guides. What you did was domination dressed as professionalism." A silence followed that no one dared to break. The bailiff's gaze stayed on Karen's hands. They were shaking now, the manicured nails tapping a nervous rhythm on the desk. The woman who strutted in like royalty now looked like someone standing in the wreckage of her own words. Maya took a slow breath. "I'm not here for money." "I just wanted the truth seen," Karen muttered. "You'll regret this." Judge Judy's head turned sharply. "Threatening a witness, Miss Carter." Karen froze. "I didn't mean it like that." "I'm sure you didn't," Judy said. "You rarely do." "That's the problem." Karen's lip quivered. She looked ready to shout, but no sound came out. Her lawyer shifted in his seat, quietly sliding his papers into a briefcase, avoiding her eyes. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Even her defense was abandoning her. The camera zoomed closer. Karen's mascara beginning to smudge, her breath shallow, her posture collapsing under the invisible weight of consequence. Judge Judy's voice softened, not with pity but precision. "Do you understand now why arrogance is so loud? It has to be, otherwise it would hear itself." Karen blinked back tears, whispering, "This isn't fair." "Fairness," Judy replied, "is finally catching up to you." The judge signaled to the clerk. "Bring me the IRS correspondence." Karen's eyes snapped up. "The what?" The sound of paper sliding across wood was deafening in the quiet courtroom. The clerk laid a sealed brown envelope before Judge Judy, stamped with 3 unmistakable letters. Karen's face drained of color. "Wait, what is this?" Judge Judy didn't answer immediately. She opened the envelope with precise, almost ritualistic care. The fluorescent lights flickered across the metal clasp as she unfolded the letter inside. This, she said finally, is where your story stops being about attitude and starts being about accountability. Karen leaned forward, voice cracking. You can't just pull my tax records. Judy's tone was measured, deliberate. Actually, I can. You run a registered business under public record. The Department of Labor shared your filings with the IRS last month after multiple wage complaints. From employees, plural, the word plural hit like thunder. Karen shook her head, eyes darting toward the cameras, searching for sympathy that wasn't there. This is an ambush. No, Judy replied. This is oversight. She lifted a page from the folder. You reported payroll expenses for 4 employees, yet the store employed 11. You underreported their pay and inflated your personal deductions. That's not just arrogance, Miss Carter. That's fraud. A collective inhale swept through the room. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God," Karen's hands trembled. "You have no proof I signed those forms." Judy held up the page. "Your signature is right here. And the IRS has confirmed its authenticity." The lawyer beside Karen closed his briefcase, his eyes full of quiet resignation. "Miss Carter," he murmured, "you should stop talking." Karen ignored him. "This isn't about money. It's about jealousy. All of you want to tear down successful women." Judy's voice sliced through her tantrum. "Successful women lift others. You stepped on them." For a moment, no one moved. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, the sound of the room breathing in disbelief. Karen's voice broke, thin and desperate now. "You don't understand. My father taught me." Judy's gaze cut her off like a blade. "Then your father taught you wrong." Karen's chin quivered. The cameras zoomed closer, capturing the precise second when her confidence cracked. Her eyes glistened, her breath hitched, and the courtroom, which had once seemed her stage, became her undoing. Judy leaned back in her chair, calm as stone. "You told me money could buy truth. You were half right." She placed the papers back into the envelope with quiet finality. "It just bought you exposure." Karen shook her head, whispering, "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything," Judy said. "You did." The judge turned toward the clerk. "Forward this documentation to the appropriate agencies. Let them decide how much her success is worth now." Cameras caught Karen's face in profile. Mascara streaking, lips trembling, pride dissolving. The audience, once drawn by spectacle, now sat in heavy silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was consequence. Judy rested her hands on the bench. "Miss Carter, I gave you the floor to prove me wrong. Instead, you built your own gallows." Karen bowed her head, unable to look up. The luxury, the arrogance, the laughter, all gone. What remained was a woman stripped bare of power. Judge Judy's eyes softened slightly, though her tone did not. "You said your father could buy me," she said. "Funny. He couldn't even buy your integrity." Karen's breath hitched and then ran for the first time. A tear fell. The IRS report wasn't a surprise reveal from the court. Judge Judy had quietly requested it before the hearing. She had known the truth from the very beginning, and had been giving Karen the rope to hang her own arrogance. The silence after Judge Judy's final words wasn't peaceful. It was surgical. Karen sat motionless, eyes glassy, the kind of stillness that comes not from control but from shock. Her diamond bracelet, the same one she flaunted at the start, now dangled loosely, clinking faintly against the desk with every tremor of her hand. Judge Judy's gaze remained fixed on her. "You may take a moment," she said. The tone wasn't kind. It was clinical, the calm before a moral autopsy. Karen inhaled shakily, blinking hard. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. Her voice, once dripping with confidence, now sounded like glass underfoot. "I was just trying to run a business." Judy didn't move. "You were running an empire of fear," she said. "Now you're just running out of excuses." A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. The audience that had once watched her with fascination now looked on with a different kind of energy. Not joy, not pity, but something closer to reckoning. Karen's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering, "Don't say another word." But Karen ignored him. She looked directly at Judge Judy, desperation mixing with defiance. "You think I'm a monster, don't you? You think you're better than me because you sit up there in your little robe." "Stop," Judy said quietly. Karen froze mid-sentence. "Better," Judy continued, voice low and steady. "No, just accountable. The difference between you and me, Miss Carter, is that I don't hide behind money when I'm wrong." The audience stirred, but Judy's eyes stayed locked on the defendant. Every word cut deeper than the last. Karen's lip trembled. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking now. "My father always said if people fear you, they'll never betray you." Judy leaned forward, tone softening, not sympathetic, but sorrowful. "And did that work, Miss Carter? Because from where I'm sitting, everyone in your world has already left." Karen blinked rapidly. Her lawyer lowered his head. The clerk looked away. Even the bailiff's expression carried a trace of pity. She pressed her palms against the table, trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she whispered. "I just didn't want to look weak." Judy sighed, setting down her pen. "Strength isn't measured by how many people you can silence. It's measured by how many you can face after you've been exposed." Tears welled in Karen's eyes, real ones this time. "I was just trying to survive." "Then you should have learned the difference between surviving and suffocating others," Judy replied. A single tear fell down Karen's cheek, catching the light as it slid over the foundation she'd so carefully applied that morning. The image was haunting, the collapse of vanity into vulnerability in real time. Judy sat back, hands clasped. "You insulted everyone in this room," she said softly, "and now you're asking for sympathy. Tell me, Miss Carter, do you even know what remorse feels like?" Karen's breath hitched. "I think I do now," Judge Judy nodded once. "Good. Because what comes next isn't about feelings, it's about consequences." She turned to the bailiff. "Bring me the financial restitution forms. Do you think remorse should erase guilt, or does justice demand consequence no matter what?" By the time the courtroom reconvened, the atmosphere had changed. The spectacle was over. What remained felt quieter, heavier, almost sacred. The cameras hummed softly, but even they seemed reluctant to intrude. Karen sat hunched forward, elbows on the table, mascara streaking faintly across her cheeks. Her once perfect curls hung limp, clinging to the sheen of sweat at her temples. The arrogance that had marched into the room hours ago was gone. What replaced it was something raw, unmasked. Judge Judy looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You wanted to prove me wrong," she said. "Now's your chance. What do you want to say?" Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She swallowed hard. "Everyone keeps acting like I'm evil. Like I planned all this." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, splintering between pride and panic. "I was raised to win, to never let anyone see weakness. My father said crying was losing." The courtroom stayed still. Even the bailiff's usual stoic posture softened slightly. Judge Judy leaned forward, her tone calm but deliberate. "So instead you made everyone else lose, so you could feel strong." Karen's eyes darted to the plaintiff's table. Denise sat there quietly, hands folded over her lap. There was no anger left in her expression, only exhaustion and a strange kind of sadness. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Karen whispered. "I just thought that's how business worked." Denise's voice came unexpectedly, soft but steady. "You didn't just hurt me. You taught everyone around you that cruelty was normal." Karen flinched. The words hit harder than any verdict could. Judy didn't intervene. She let the silence linger, the kind of silence that forces truth to settle in. Karen's breath hitched again. "You don't understand," she said, almost pleading now. "When my dad died, the only thing he left me was the company name and the expectation to be like him. I thought if I stopped acting powerful, I'd disappear." Judy exhaled slowly. "And now you see the truth. You didn't disappear. You just became the thing you feared most, forgettable." Karen broke then, fully, audibly. A sob escaped her lips, unfiltered, human. Her hand flew up to cover her face, but the cameras had already seen. The audience didn't move. They weren't watching a villain anymore. They were witnessing a person finally confronting herself. Denise whispered, just loud enough for the mic to catch, "I just wanted you to treat people right." That single sentence froze Karen mid-tear. She looked up, eyes swollen, and for a heartbeat everything, the money, the power, the ego, fell away. Judge Judy's tone softened to a near whisper. "Apology means nothing when it only arrives after exposure. But accountability? That can still mean something." Karen nodded weakly, unable to speak. The courtroom's tension loosened, not into relief, but reflection. The audience exhaled as though they too had been holding something inside. Judge Judy turned one final page in the file, her voice lower now. "Miss Carter, you've confessed what happened. Now we'll discuss what comes next." Her eyes narrowed. "And you may not like the ending." Karen reveals that her cruelty was inherited. Her father's teachings had shaped her worldview. What began as arrogance becomes a generational reckoning. Her father was the same man she once bragged could buy the judge. That legacy, finally exposed, redefines her downfall as both moral and emotional. The courtroom felt different now, not hostile, not tense but hollow, as though the arrogance had been vacuumed out of the room and only its echo remained. Karen sat in silence, shoulders slumped. The designer dress that once screamed confidence now hanging like a costume that no longer fit the role. Her lawyer had stopped taking notes. The audience had stopped whispering. Even Judge Judy's voice when it came was softer, but no less sharp. "Miss Carter," she began, "you spoke about your father, about how he taught you strength." Karen nodded, eyes downcast. "He said people respect money. He said kindness makes you weak." Judy tapped her pen against the bench, each click echoing like a heartbeat. "And do you still believe that?" Karen hesitated. "It's what I was taught. It's all I knew." Judy's gaze didn't waver. "Then allow me to teach you something different." The camera panned slowly across the courtroom, the plaintiff's calm expression, the spectators leaning in, the judge's steady eyes. The air felt thick with something more powerful than accusation. Understanding. "When people say kindness is weakness," Judy continued, "what they mean is accountability feels uncomfortable. Arrogance is easy. It protects you from reflection." Karen blinked, her tears glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Reflection," she repeated quietly. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "That's not punishment," Judy replied. "That's clarity." The plaintiff, Denise, finally spoke. Her voice carried gentleness that seemed to surprise even her. "You don't have to be like him," she said softly. "You get to decide who you are now." Karen's chin quivered. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Denise shook her head. "Maybe not yet. But you can still stop being the person who needs it." A pin-drop silence filled the space. The bailiff's hands rested calmly by his side. The cameras zoomed in on Karen's face, the moment when shame began turning into self-recognition. Judge Judy leaned back. "People mistake power for control," she said. "But control without conscience isn't power, it's panic. Real power is the ability to face truth without collapsing." Karen met her gaze for the first time in minutes. There was no defiance left, only fatigue and faint gratitude that someone had said what she never dared to admit aloud. Her voice came out a whisper. "I don't want to be like him anymore." Judy nodded. "Then stop performing for ghosts. The world doesn't need your father's reflection. It needs yours." Karen pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, tears breaking free again, this time not out of humiliation, but release. The judge closed her file gently, not with finality, but with intention. "Miss Harris," she said, turning to the plaintiff, "you showed patience where others would have shown vengeance. That's not weakness, and that's the highest form of power." Denise's eyes watered, but she smiled faintly, almost in disbelief. Judge Judy picked up her gavel but didn't strike it. "We're not finished yet," she said. "Now that truth is on record, it's time for justice to take form." The gavel hovered mid-air, waiting for the weight of consequence. The gavel hovered above the bench, motionless, a symbol of judgment waiting to fall. But Judge Judy didn't strike it yet. Instead, she let the silence expand, wrapping around the courtroom like a slow, deliberate breath before the final cut. Karen sat motionless, her eyes red, her voice gone. The arrogance that had once filled every corner of her posture had drained away completely, leaving only exhaustion, the kind that comes when denial finally collapses. Judge Judy's tone broke the quiet, calm but precise. "Miss Carter, this case began with entitlement, evolved into evidence and ended with truth. What happens now is not about humiliation, it's about restoration." The audience leaned forward. Even the cameras adjusted focus, drawn instinctively to the stillness of authority. Judy reached for the documents before her, the unpaid wages, the IRS records, the testimony transcripts, each page representing a layer of Karen's deception stripped bare. "Based on the evidence," she said, "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Harris. You will pay all unpaid wages, court fees, and compensation for emotional distress. A faint exhale escaped from Denise, part relief, part disbelief. But Judy wasn't finished. Additionally, she continued, I am referring the financial discrepancies to the proper authorities. Whether criminal charges follow is no longer in this court's hands. It's in theirs. The room went still. No gasps this time. Only quiet acceptance. Karen's lips trembled. So, it's over? Judy's gaze softened, but only slightly. Not yet. Karen blinked, confused. What else is there? Judy folded her hands together, her voice dropping into that measured tone that always preceded her sharpest truths. Accountability doesn't end with a signature on a check. It starts when you stop running from the mirror. Karen's shoulders shook. What do you want from me? Judy paused. Nothing. I just want you to understand what you've done. Not to your image, but to people who believed in you. For the first time, Karen turned toward Denise. Their eyes met across the courtroom, not as boss and employee, not as accuser and accused, but as two women who had both been shaped and nearly destroyed by power. Karen whispered, I'm sorry. Denise's face softened, her voice calm but resolute. Then make sure it means something. Judy watched the exchange, the faintest glimmer of humanity touching her eyes before she masked it again. Miss Harris, your courage brought this truth to light. You stood against arrogance and remained dignified. That deserves recognition. Denise nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Judy turned her focus back to Karen. You said earlier that money buys respect. Today you learned it can also rent humiliation. But the one thing money can never purchase, she paused, is character. Karen lowered her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The courtroom stayed perfectly still, as if even time had stopped to witness consequence meet comprehension. Judy lifted the gavel, her voice steady. Judgment for the plaintiff. The gavel came down, one strike clear and final. The sound echoed long after the wood stopped vibrating. Judge Judy set the gavel down and said quietly, Now the question is whether this lesson ends here or finally begins. The gavel's echo lingered long after it fell, bouncing off the walls like a memory refusing to fade. The courtroom, moments ago a theater of confrontation, was now a chapel of silence. The cameras lowered their lenses. Even they seemed reluctant to record what came next. Karen didn't move. Her mascara had bled into grey shadows beneath her eyes, and her voice, once sharp enough to slice through air, was now nothing more than a broken whisper. The woman who had strutted in declaring power now sat small behind a desk that suddenly felt too big. Judge Judy rose from the bench. Her robe swayed slightly as she stepped down, a rare act. The audience shifted, unsure if they were allowed to breathe. Judy approached the defense table, stopping just close enough for her words to carry weight, not threat. You came in here asking for victory, she said quietly. But sometimes losing is the only thing that makes us human again. Karen looked up, eyes swollen. I didn't mean to be this person, she said. Her voice broke on the last word, splintering into something raw. I just didn't know how else to survive. Judy studied her for a long moment. You don't survive by stepping on people, Miss Carter. You survive by standing beside them. No more words, no lecture. Just truth, and the kind that doesn't need applause. Karen nodded faintly, her chin trembling. I'll pay her. All of it. You will, Judy said. But what you owe isn't written on paper. Across the room, Denise clutched her folder, that same folder she'd brought on the first day. Only now she held it loosely, as if its weight had finally lifted. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her expression carried something stronger. Closure. The bailiff called for adjournment. The audience stood, murmuring softly. No laughter, no outrage, just quiet reflection. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was a reckoning to remember. As Karen walked toward the exit, flashes from the hallway cameras cut through the dim light. She didn't hide her face this time. She didn't need to. The shame, the truth, they had already made her transparent. Outside, the murmurs of the crowd were muffled by the heavy doors. Inside, Judge Judy remained seated, staring down at the empty chairs. Her pen rested beside her notes. Her eyes for once looked tired, not from anger, but from empathy. She whispered to herself, Power without conscience is just noise. The bailiff turned off the courtroom lights one by one. Shadows stretched long across the polished floor. and in the fading light, Karen's reflection briefly flickered on the glass, no longer smug, no longer powerful, just human. As the doors closed, Denise lingered one last moment, glancing back toward the bench. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Judge Judy nodded once, a subtle gesture, acknowledgement without ceremony. The lights dimmed completely, and only the faint echo of the gavel seemed to remain. Then Judy's voice, low and reflective, broke the stillness. "Justice doesn't always roar," she said. "Sometimes it whispers. Before you hear the final verdict, ask yourself, can people truly change, or do they just learn to hide who they are?" The courtroom was empty now. The rows of seats that had been packed with murmuring spectators were nothing but shadows stretching across the floor. The silence was thick but not cold, the kind of silence that carries understanding. Judge Judy sat alone at her bench, the case file open before her like a confession left behind. The bailiff had long since stepped out. The cameras were off. Only the faint hum of the overhead lights filled the air. Judy's eyes lingered on the final page. The signatures, the numbers, the quiet conclusion of chaos. Then she closed the file slowly, her hand resting on it for a beat longer than usual. She whispered almost to herself, "Money builds walls, but truth finds the cracks." Outside the courtroom doors, the faint echo of reporters' voices drifted in, questions, flashes, curiosity. But Judy didn't move. Her gaze stayed on the gavel, still and waiting. "So many come in here thinking power makes them untouchable," she said softly, "and every time I watch it crumble at the sound of its own echo." A pause. Then a faint, almost weary smile. Because arrogance always ends the same way, it runs out of room to hide. The camera, if it was still rolling, would have cut to the hallway. Karen standing in front of a sea of microphones, her voice trembling as she muttered, "No comment." The crowd that once admired her wealth now stared with quiet judgment. The woman who had believed she could buy her way out of truth was learning the price of exposure, and it wasn't one she could afford. Across the same hallway, Denise exited the building holding her folder, that same folder that had carried her struggle, her fear, and now her closure. Her daughter waited just outside, running into her arms. The hug was brief, wordless, but it said everything. "You did it. You told the truth." As they walked away, a soft drizzle began to fall, faint at first, then steady. The rain washed against the courthouse steps, glinting under the streetlights like tiny fragments of absolution. Back inside, Judge Judy finally stood. She gathered her papers, placed the gavel down gently, and looked up at the empty gallery one last time. "When people say justice is blind," she said quietly, "they forget that it listens." Her reflection flickered faintly in the polished surface of the bench, tired, composed, unshaken. She turned off the desk lamp, the last light in the room dimming to black. Then, just before leaving, she paused at the door, looking back once more toward the bench. Her voice, unsteady, deliberate, carried through the empty space like the final note of a symphony. Arrogance may build empires, but only humility survives their fall. The door closed. The sound was soft, final. The gavel remained on the desk untouched, a silent reminder that justice doesn't need noise to be heard. It simply waits for truth to speak. In 36 seconds, arrogance turned into regret, and in one quiet verdict the world was reminded, power means nothing without character.